Don't start the timer just yet, because before I begin, I do need to give you all a trigger warning. The story I'm going to tell tonight does contain references to child sexual abuse. It will not be graphic or detailed or long, but if the subject matter is unsettling for anyone, I completely understand and respect if you need to duck out for this one. And I do have permission from the victim to share this information. It was the summer of 2016. I had spent the spring watching the Me Too movement flood my social feed and hearing for the first time about how my childhood best friend was molested in her own home by one of her parents' boarders for 3 years when she was growing up. I had also just delivered my second child and realized as well and come to grips with the fact that I had also been abused in my home growing up. Now, as I processed through all of this, I recognized that my abuse had been physical, emotional, financial, religious, psychological, all of that. But anytime I racked my mind to think, have I been molested? I came up with nothing. And so each time a friend came forward to share her Me Too story, I was simply grateful that this pain had not happened to me. Until one evening, I was brushing my teeth and I was gazing into the mirror, and a very small person looked back at me, about 1 year old. And that very small child that I used to be looked back out at the mother I had become 30 years later and saw somebody she could trust with a story she had never told anyone. And I thought back to when I was 1 year old, and I remembered a game that my father used to play with me in the bathtub. It was a game that no 1-year-old baby can understand, and no adult can play with any innocence. And I look back at that child who had divulged this to me, a child that had never forgotten the facts of what had happened, but had never entrusted them to anyone. And we both knew together, we were sure of what had happened. So I went downstairs and I told my husband what I had just realized, and he was very quiet. He didn't say much, but what I do remember him saying was that it was a very good thing my father now lived on the other side of the country. I didn't tell anyone else for another 3 years. The next person I told was my mother, after she had divorced my father the year prior after suffering 29 years in an abusive marriage. And I just found an opportunity to disclose to her very simply and briefly, in a few short general sentences, what had happened. And my mother asked me, "Are you sure? You were really young. Maybe you're not remembering right. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he didn't mean to." And so I retorted in that moment with the graphic description that had been seared on my mind that I had never forgotten, because I now realized what it was. And I had hoped to spare her that description, but it was necessary. And it was in that moment that she acknowledged that my father is a pedophile. And that was her word, not mine. The next people I told were my in-laws. I asked them to sit down so I could share something important with them one evening. And as I tried to tell my story, they interrupted me and distracted me repeatedly with light conversation and jokes to make the weight of it seem less heavy, I guess, until I finally reached the pivotal moment of the narrative, by which point my father-in-law had fallen asleep in his chair. One of my sisters-in-law never said a word in response to what I shared with her. And the one brother I still trusted at the time to share this with, when I disclosed to him, he asked me the same questions my mother had. are you sure? He's kind of a goofy guy. He's just like that sometimes. Maybe he didn't really think about it. And I didn't have it in me to share the graphic description yet again with my brother over the phone. So I let it be, and he continued to doubt me and excuse my dad. People who ask victims of abuse who come forward, "Are you sure?" are asking the wrong question. I will always be certain of what happened to me. The real question is, are you sure that you want to know the truth? Thank you.